Hi there, and welcome to the Daily Gardener, and thank you for listening. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling. It's October 22nd. Today we celebrate the daughter of a millionaire who found solace in nature and the refreshing approach of one of the country's top naturalists. We learn about the discovery of vanilla, complete with a ravishing recipe for a vanilla coffee liqueur from 1974. We'll commemorate the plaque that was placed over the doctor's pit where the botanist David Douglas died. We'll hear the oft-quoted poem that begins, "The scarlet of maples can shake me like a cry of bugles going by." And we grow that garden library today with a new book for 2019 called The Sanctuary of My Garden, Poems by the Australian poet Fotula Reynolds. I'll talk about the last call for bringing your houseplants back indoors, and then we'll wrap things up with a sweet story of a botany curriculum for fourth graders in Louisville, Kentucky. But first, let's catch up on a few recent events. I ran across the most delightful wedding story the other day. It was shared on the blog Plans and Presents. It was a wedding that had a garden theme, and I shared it in the free Facebook community for listeners of the show. You can check out the full post there, but I'm going to give you just a quick overview of how the couple who share a love for gardens and garden history met. This is from the bride, Nancy. As a lifelong learner and an avid gardener and a fan of American history, I had embarked upon a trip to follow the research I had done on the plant exchange between Philadelphia and London in the 18th century, and a botanist named Peter Collinson, who had lived at that time in Peckham. Journeying to London, I made contact with people who suggested I get in touch with Derek, as he had written an article about Collinson. Eventually, Derek and I met up, talked endlessly about Collinson, research, and other things. Derek and I are an older couple, he being in his late 80s, and I am in my late 70s. Having been happily single for 40 years, I was never expecting a marriage proposal, but it did happen. Now for the good part. Here's how Nancy decided to incorporate the garden into her beautiful wedding. She wrote, "I wanted the flowers of the day to be a peach pink apricot color scheme, and I knew that they would add a punch of color alongside the black outfit that I planned to wear. Because of our background, I wanted the chapel to look like a garden. Rather than have typical flower arrangements, Anya turned the asylum chapel into an amazing and magical garden with plots of the garden here and there and a path through the garden to the altar." Well, I reached out to Allison over at Plans and Presents to tell her how much I enjoyed her post. And she said, "That wedding was stunning, and it was my honor to feature it." And if you get a chance, you really should head over to the Facebook community to check out the post. Just the next time you're in Facebook, just search for Daily Gardener Community and request to join. It's a free group, and you can see all of the posts that I reference on the show. Another great story in the world of horticulture recently ran in the Denver Post. It turns out there's a fun new collaboration between the Denver Botanic Gardens and Mythology Distillery, a cocktail bar and distillery in the heart of the Low High neighborhood in Denver. Blake Berger is a horticulturalist at the Denver Botanic Gardens, and Scott Yeats is the founder of Mythology Distillery. And they're also old college buddies from their days back at Colorado State University. I love this story so much that I reached out to the Mythology Distillery to learn more. And by the way, the bottle of Forager gin is beautiful. And I love how Mythology tells the story of the gin on their website. Keep in mind, they're in Denver, the Mile High City. Here's what they wrote. 2 friends, a distiller and a horticulturist, forage for a missing ingredient in a garden 1 mile above the sea. 2 pounds of chamomile and elderflower, along with 3 pounds of lemon verbena, were all it took to make 3,000 bottles of Forager botanical gin. If you're in Denver, you can pick up a bottle of Forager gin for yourself or for a gift for around $35 from Mythology. Here's today's brevities. On this day in 1910, the news out of Pittsburgh announced the creation of a new chrysanthemum named in honor of Henry Clay Frick's only daughter, Helen, who was 22 years old. The public was invited to view the lovely blossom in Frick's $1 million conservatory. The newspaper reported that it took Frick's, quote, high-priced gardeners 4 years to create the flower. A few years earlier, when Helen had become a debutante, her father had offered to give her a gift of whatever her heart desired. Helen asked for a park, but not just any park. She requested a wilderness park. She wanted a place where the land would remain in a natural state, and she hoped the children of Pittsburgh would use the park to connect with the natural world. Helen's birthday present became known as Frick Park, and today it remains the largest park in Pittsburgh with 561 acres of trails and wooded areas. And it was on this day in 1942 that the Freeport Journal published a delightful story about the naturalist Edwin Teale. Here's what it said. About 6 years ago, he recounts, I was writing an article on fishing. I took some pictures of dry flies, and somehow that started me photographing live insects. Soon afterward, neighbors stared when they saw him crawling about his backyard with a magnifying glass. It's a universe, Teale says. Once he made friends with a praying mantis. He named her Dinah, and she shared his study for weeks. Finally, Dinah devoured her own arm. Teale had just time to get the picture. During World War II, Teale's son David was killed in Germany. He and his wife began traveling across the country by automobile. Their trips helped them cope with their grief and became an integral part of Teale's writing. Their 1947 journey, covering 17,000 miles in a black Buick, led to Teale's book, North with the Spring. Additional road trips led to more books, Journey into Summer, Autumn Across America, and Wandering Through Winter, which won the Pulitzer Prize in 1966. And it was Teale who said, for man, autumn is a time of harvest, of gathering together. For nature, it is a time of sowing, of scattering abroad. And it was on this day in 1974 that a newspaper clipping from the Star Gazette out of Elmira, New York, shared a recipe for vanilla coffee liqueur. But before the recipe was shared, the author took a moment to explain how the signature ingredient, vanilla, was discovered. In school, I learned that the explorer Hernan Cortez discovered vanilla during the 15th century when he quaffed a cup of hot chocolate at the court of Montezuma. The Aztec Indians made this pungent beverage from the beans of the cacao tree, combined with pods the Spaniards named vanilla. People believed the vanilla orchid would only grow in Mexico. Then a French botanist discovered the bee that pollinated the orchid. Eventually, Madagascar became the primary grower of the vanilla orchid, which grows on a coarse vine that requires about 3 years of pampering before it bears fruit. Vanilla came into its own with the invention of ice cream in the 17th century, and today vanilla is 3 times as popular as any other flavor. If you head on over to thedailygardener.org, you can see the recipe for the vanilla coffee liqueur that was shared on this day in 1974. And the author said that it was a liqueur sauce that could transform a dish of ice cream or pudding into an Epicurean treat. On this day in 2014, the botanist David Douglas was memorialized with a plaque at his death site. The occasion marked the 100th anniversary of Douglas's death. The Oregon Cultural Heritage Commission had created the plaque because Douglas was the first scientist to visit the Oregon Territory. Douglas scientifically identified hundreds of plants during his lifetime, including the Douglas fir, the state tree of Oregon. In addition to the Oregon contingent, botanists from Scotland, England, and Hawaii placed the plaque at the spot on the mountain where Douglas died on the Big Island. The locals call it the Doctor's Pit. Douglas died after falling into a pit designed to trap animals. Tragically, a bull was also in the pit, and it gored Douglas to death. The site hasn't changed much over the past 180 years. Today, a dirt road leads the occasional visitor near the site. In Unearthed Words, here are some thoughts on fall from one of Canada's poet laureates, Bliss Carman. The scarlet of maples can shake me like a cry of bugles going by, and my lonely spirit thrills to see the frosty asters like smoke upon the hills. Today's Grow That Garden Library book recommendation is The Sanctuary of My Garden, Poems by Fotula Reynolds. Here's an excerpt from her signature poem, The Sanctuary of My Garden. In the evening of a Mediterranean summer, where the stars wink their little eyes and the moon graces us with her outstandingness, I have traveled the world fearlessly in my imagination. For a time, I am out of reach, but you can always find me in the sanctuary of my garden. Fotula's book is available using the Amazon link in today's show notes over at thedailygardener.org. It's a paperback and would make a lovely Christmas present, and it sells for just $8. All right, it's time to improve your garden, one actionable tip at a time. Here's today's garden chore. It's the gardener's version of last call for alcohol, and it's last call for houseplants, y'all. Seriously, if you're a northern gardener, bring your houseplants inside. The colder it gets, the greater the shock they will experience. And when you bring your houseplants inside, spray them down with sharp streams of water. And I like to add a little Dawn dish soap to mine to give them a good cleaning. There's a large old antique table in the middle of my botanical library where I place many of my houseplants. The houseplants form kind of the centerpiece of the table, and they're ringed by an old typewriter, stacks of garden books, little baby pruners, a mister, and some extra pots. I have to say that I love how my houseplants have brought life and fragrance into that space. Then I added a little Alexa dot on the windowsill the other day, and I have her play sounds from nature or the rainforest. You'd never know it's cold and dreary outside. So fun. Finally, here's something sweet to revive the little botanic spark in your heart. On this day in 2003, the newspaper in Louisville, Kentucky, featured an article about a fourth grade classroom that had turned into a laboratory of botanists. For 3 weeks, the kids wearing lab coats were led down a path of botanical discovery by their student teacher named Bill Stangl. In the first week, the children collected and studied leaves, and they looked at the plant parts under a microscope. In week 2, they dipped carnations into water mixed with food coloring to watch the petals change colors. At the end of the class, the children stood up and sang to the tune of Head, Shoulders, Knees, and Toes, Stigma, Petal, Stem, and Roots. Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener, and remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day. The Daily Gardener is produced weekdays in lovely Maple Grove, Minnesota. You can find complete show notes over at thedailygardener.org, and be sure to share the show with your garden friends. You can find The Daily Gardener on all your favorite social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Pinterest, and of course, Facebook. While you're over at Facebook, don't forget to join the Daily Gardener community. Just search for these 3 words, Daily Gardener Community. The group will pop right up, and then request to join. Finally, I want to thank my team at Podfly Productions, where my fabulous editor is Eric Begay. Have a great day in the garden, and we'll see you tomorrow. Stigma, petal, stem, and roots, stem, and roots. Stigma, petal, stem, and roots, stem, and roots. Stigma, petal, stem, and roots, stem, and roots. Yeah.